Jungkook kept a voice note of Jimin's laughter for years. While playing it in front of Jimin, he claimed it was his favorite voice in the world. A hidden voice note, a fragile friendship, and a confession years in the making, Jungkook's secret reshapes everything he and Jimin believed. The phone slipped from Jungkook's trembling hand, the tiny speaker crackling to life as a bright, unguarded laugh filled the silent room. It was unmistakable. Jimin's laughter, soft at first, then bursting into that airy, breathless melody that used to echo through practice rooms at 3 a.m., through late-night convenience store runs, through years that now felt impossibly distant. The sound hung in the air between them, fragile as glass. Jimin didn't move. The rain outside drummed against the studio windows, blurring the neon lights into smeared streaks of red and blue. The room smelled faintly of dust, old wood, and the citrus cleaner the janitor used every Friday night. Jungkook's chest tightened with every second the audio played, looping without mercy. He hadn't meant to press play. Or maybe he had. Jimin's eyes flicked to the phone on the floor, then back to Jungkook. There was no anger in them, only a careful, searching stillness that made Jungkook feel more exposed than any accusation could. "You kept that?" Jimin asked quietly. His voice was softer than Jungkook remembered, stripped of the easy teasing lilt it once carried. Time had carved new edges into it, just as it had carved new silences between them. Jungkook swallowed, "Yeah." The recording ended with a faint rustle and Jungkook's own younger voice saying something unintelligible, followed by Jimin's laughter again, closer, warmer, alive. Then silence. He bent to pick up the phone, but his fingers hovered inches above it, as if touching it might shatter whatever fragile truth had surfaced. "It's old," Jungkook said, "from before. Before the schedules that swallowed their days, before the arguments that never found resolution, before the quiet drift that felt less like a decision and more like gravity." Jimin let out a slow breath. "You recorded me without telling me." "You were laughing at the way I burned ramen," Jungkook said, a faint, helpless smile tugging at his mouth. "You said it tasted like betrayal." For a moment, something flickered in Jimin's expression, recognition, maybe even the ghost of amusement. Then it vanished. "You kept it for years," Jimin said, "not a question." Jungkook finally picked up the phone, his thumb hovering over the screen. The file name read simply, "Favorite Voice, M4A." "I changed phones 3 times," he said. "Almost lost it once. I panicked more about this file than my bank app." The admission hung between them, absurd and painfully honest. Jimin's gaze softened, but his shoulders remained tense, as if braced against a storm that hadn't yet arrived. Why? The question was simple, the answer was not. Jungkook stared at the waveform frozen on his screen, jagged peaks and valleys capturing a moment of joy that time had tried and failed to erase. He could still remember the night, the flickering fluorescent lights, the burnt smell of overcooked noodles. Jimin doubled over in laughter with tears in his eyes. Jungkook had felt something then, something terrifying in its clarity. "I was afraid I'd forget," Jungkook said finally. Jimin frowned. "Forget what?" "What it sounded like," Jungkook said, "when you were happy, when we were." He trailed off. The word together felt too heavy, too final. The rain intensified, hammering against the windows like impatient knuckles. Somewhere in the building, a door slammed, the echo rolling through the empty hallways. Jimin walked past him to the window, his reflection fractured by streaks of water. He rested his forehead briefly against the cool glass, a habit Jungkook remembered from years ago. Whenever Jimin felt overwhelmed, he sought out cold surfaces, grounding himself in sensation. "You could have asked me to laugh," Jimin said. Jungkook huffed a quiet, humorless breath. "It wouldn't have been the same." Because it wouldn't have been real. Because the laugh in the recording had been unguarded, unperformed, untouched by expectation. Because it had belonged to a version of Jimin that Jungkook feared he had helped erase. Silence settled again, heavy but no longer brittle. Jungkook noticed the small things he hadn't allowed himself to see until now. The faint scar along Jimin's wrist from a childhood fall, the way he still tapped his fingers against his thigh in uneven rhythms when thinking, the subtle slump in his posture that spoke of exhaustion rather than laziness. Time had changed them both, but it hadn't erased the details. I listened to it on bad days, Jungkook admitted. When everything felt too loud, it reminded me there was a time when things were simple, when you were right there. Jimin turned from the window, his eyes glistened, though no tears fell. You mean when we didn't know how to hurt each other yet? The words landed with quiet precision. Jungkook's chest tightened, memories surfaced unbidden, sharp words thrown in exhaustion, messages left unanswered, pride masquerading as self-respect. Neither of them had meant to let the distance grow, but neither had known how to stop it. I never stopped caring, Jungkook said, the confession slipping out before he could second-guess it. I just didn't know how to stay. Jimin studied him for a long moment, as if weighing the truth of those words against years of silence. The tension in his shoulders eased just a fraction. You always ran when things got complicated, Jimin said, not unkindly. You ran from arguments, from feelings, from me. Jungkook nodded, the honesty strung, but it also felt like air entering a long-sealed room. I was afraid if I stayed, I'd ruin everything. And leaving didn't, Jimin asked. The question held no accusation, only quiet curiosity. Jungkook looked down at the phone in his hand. The screen had dimmed, reflecting his own face back at him, older, sharper, eyes shadowed by regrets he rarely voiced. It did, he said. Another silence followed, but this one felt different, less like a wall, more like a space waiting to be filled. Jimin stepped closer, his gaze dropping to the phone. Play it again. Jungkook hesitated. Are you sure? Jimin nodded. The laughter filled the room once more, bright and unrestrained. This time, Jimin didn't flinch. He listened, eyes half closed, as if reacquainting himself with a forgotten part of his own soul. When the recording ended, he let out a soft breath. I sound free. You were, Jungkook said. Jimin opened his eyes. So were you. The realization settled over them both. The recording wasn't just a relic of Jimin's joy, it was a fragment of a time when Jungkook had felt unburdened enough to cherish it. Jimin gave a small, tentative smile. You really think it's your favorite voice in the world? Jungkook met his gaze, the answer steady despite the storm still raging inside him. I don't think I know. The words didn't fix the past. They didn't erase the years of distance or the mistakes etched into their shared history, but they shifted something, like a door unlatched after being stuck for too long. Jimin exhaled slowly, tension leaving his frame in a visible wave. Then maybe we can make new recordings. Jungkook blinked. What? Not of me laughing at your cooking, Jimin said, a faint spark of mischief returning. Although that's still a possibility, but of us, talking, arguing, figuring things out instead of pretending we're fine. Hope, fragile and unfamiliar, stirred in Jungkook's chest. You want that. Jimin shrugged lightly, but his eyes were steady. I don't want to be a voice note you replay when you're lonely. I want to be someone who's actually there. The rain began to soften, its relentless rhythm easing into a gentle patter. Outside, the neon lights steadied, their colors no longer smeared by heavy drops. Jungkook slipped the phone into his pocket, the recording safe, but no longer his only tether to the past. Then stay, he said, and I'll stay too. Jimin studied him, searching for hesitation, for the instinct to run. Finding none, he nodded. They stood in the quiet studio, the air no longer suffocating, but charged with the tentative warmth of second chances. The past remained, etched into memory and sound waves, but it no longer held them captive. Somewhere in the building, someone laughed, a distant, unfamiliar sound. Jungkook listened, then glanced at Jimin, who rolled his eyes at the coincidence. That one's not making it into your favorites, Jimin said. Jungkook smiled, the expression unfamiliar yet undeniably real. No, he agreed, I think I'm ready for a new collection. And for the first time in years, the silence between them felt less like an ending and more like the beginning of a conversation they were finally brave enough to have. The elevator jolted to a halt between floors, the lights flickering once before plunging Jungkook and Jimin into a dim, humming half-darkness. Jungkook's first instinct was to reach out, his fingers brushing Jimin's wrist in the sudden stillness. The contact sent a jolt through him, familiar, electric, unwelcome in its intensity. "Don't," Jimin said sharply, pulling his hand back. The word echoed in the confined metal box, sharper than the grinding cables above them. Jungkook froze, his hand suspended midair before dropping to his side. "Sorry," he muttered. The emergency light cast a dull amber glow over Jimin's face, carving shadows beneath his cheekbones, making his eyes look darker, more guarded. Outside, the building groaned with the strain of the storm. Rain battered the structure, wind howling through unseen cracks like a restless animal. "Of course this would happen tonight," Jimin said, pressing the emergency button repeatedly. The intercom crackled but yielded only static. Jungkook forced a breath through his lungs. "It's just a power fluctuation, they'll fix it." "You always say that," Jimin shot back. "It's just temporary, it'll pass, things will fix themselves." The accusation hung heavy, heavier than the stalled elevator. Jungkook's jaw tightened. "You think I wanted things to fall apart?" "I think you let them," Jimin said. His voice trembled, not with fear, but with something closer to fury held too long beneath the surface. The small space amplified every sound, the rasp of their breathing, the faint creak of metal, the distant thunder rolling like an approaching verdict. Jungkook leaned back against the cold wall. "We are really doing this, trapped in an elevator." Jimin laughed once, humorless. "When else? You were always too busy running to stay for the conversation." The words hit their mark. Jungkook felt them settle into old fractures, reopening wounds he'd convinced himself had scarred over. "I ran because you never needed me," Jungkook snapped, the confession ripping free before he could stop it. "You had everyone, fans, friends, people who understood you better than I did. I was just a background noise." Jimin stared at him, stunned. "Background noise? You think that's what you were to me?" "You stopped calling," Jungkook said. "Stopped showing up. You said you were tired, that you needed space. What was I supposed to think?" "That I was drowning," Jimin's voice cracked, echoing off steel walls. "That I couldn't breathe under expectations I never asked for. That every time I looked at you, I saw someone who deserved a better version of me than the one barely holding it together." The admission stunned them both into silence. The elevator creaked, shifting slightly, and Jungkook felt his pulse thunder in his ears. The storm outside seemed to press closer, as if the world itself were listening. "You never told me that," Jungkook said quietly. "I tried," Jimin whispered. "You kept saying you were fine, that you could handle anything. You never let me see you struggle, so how could I admit that I was falling apart?" Jungkook's laugh was soft and broken. "I thought being strong was the only way to stay. And I thought being honest would make you leave," Jimin said. Their fears, laid bare, felt absurd in their symmetry. The emergency light flickered again. For a moment, the darkness deepened, swallowing the edges of the world until all that existed was breath and presence, and the memory of a laugh stored in a file named Favorite Voice. Jungkook slid down the wall until he was sitting on the cold floor, knees drawn up. "I listened to your laughter because it was proof that you were real, that what we had was real." Jimin's shoulders sagged. He slowly mirrored the movement, sitting opposite him, their shoes almost touching. "I hated my own voice for a while," Jimin admitted. "Every performance, every interview, it felt like I was playing a character people loved more than me. That recording, that was me before I learned to perform happiness." Jungkook looked up, meeting his eyes. "That's why it mattered. It was you without armor." Jimin's gaze softened, then hardened again as another thought surfaced. "Did you ever play it for anyone else?" The question was quiet, but its edge was unmistakable. No, Jungkook said immediately, it was never for anyone else. Not even when you started working with them, Jimin's tone sharpened, when you found new people to laugh with. Ah, there it was, the jealousy neither of them had dared name. They weren't you, Jungkook said, more forcefully than he intended. No one was. Jimin's eyes glistened, but his mouth twisted. You replaced me. I survived without you, Jungkook corrected. There's a difference. Thunder cracked so loudly the elevator walls seemed to vibrate. The lights flickered again, plunging them briefly into darkness before the amber glow returned, weaker now. Jimin hugged his arms around himself. Do you know what hurt the most? Jungkook shook his head, afraid to breathe. You stopped fighting for me, Jimin said. You used to argue, push back, refuse to let me shut you out. Then one day you just agreed. You said, if that's what you need, and walked away. Jungkook closed his eyes, the memory slicing cleanly through him. He had thought he was respecting boundaries. He had thought love meant letting go. I thought I was doing the right thing, he said. Maybe for you, Jimin replied. For me, it felt like confirmation that I was too much trouble to keep. The words landed like a physical blow. The elevator shuddered again, then stilled. The storm outside began to ease, the thunder rolling farther away. In the quiet that followed, their breathing synchronized without either noticing. Jungkook opened his eyes. You were never too much. Jimin's lips parted, but no words came. You were the only person who ever made me want to stay, Jungkook continued. And that terrified me, because if I stayed and you still left, I didn't think I'd survive it. Jimin's composure cracked. A tear slipped down his cheek, catching the dim light before disappearing into the collar of his shirt. I didn't leave, he whispered. I waited. I kept thinking you'd come back and argue and refuse to let me push you away. When you didn't, I thought you stopped caring. Jungkook's throat tightened. I never stopped. The space between them felt charged, fragile, like a bridge made of glass. A faint mechanical whir sounded above them. The elevator lights brightened slightly. Somewhere, power was returning. Jimin let out a shaky laugh. Of course it starts working now. Jungkook managed a small smile. Timing, always been cruel to us. The elevator jolted, beginning its slow descent. Neither of them stood. I'm angry at you, Jimin said suddenly. I know. I'm angry at myself too. Jungkook nodded, me too. The admission didn't solve anything. It didn't erase years of misunderstanding, but it felt like truth, raw, unfiltered, and necessary. As the elevator resumed its movement, Jimin looked at him with a mixture of exhaustion and fragile hope. If we try again, it won't be like before. It can't be, Jungkook said. We're not the same people. Good, Jimin whispered, because the old us didn't know how to stay. The doors slid open onto the dim lobby, emergency lights casting long shadows across the floor. The storm had weakened to a steady drizzle, the world outside washed clean but uncertain. They remained seated for a moment longer, suspended between past and possibility. Then Jimin stood and extended a hand, not tentative, not forced. Jungkook looked at it, then up at him and took it. The contact was warm, grounding, real. They stepped out of the elevator together, not as the people they used to be, and not yet as whatever they might become, but as two men finally willing to confront the silence that had once defined them, and the dangerous, exhilarating truth that they still had a choice to stay. The lobby doors slammed open under the force of the wind, and a soaked figure staggered inside, breathless, eyes wild, looking straight at Jimin. Jungkook felt Jimin's hand stiffen in his. Jimin, the stranger gasped, water dripping from dark hair onto the marble floor. You turned your phone off. I've been trying to reach you for hours. Jimin's fingers slipped from Jungkook's grip. The loss of contact was immediate, cold. Minyu, Jimin's voice carried shock and something else, guilt. Jungkook's stomach dropped. Minyu, the name echoed in the hollow space of his chest like a warning bell he had ignored for too long. The man, tall, sharp-featured, clothes clinging to him from the rain, stepped closer, ignoring Jungkook entirely. You weren't at the apartment. I thought something happened. You said you wouldn't disappear like that again. Jungkook's jaw tightened. Disappear again. The words landed like accusations aimed at a past he was no longer allowed to rewrite. Jimin ran a hand through his damp hair. I needed space tonight. You vanish during a storm and call it space. Minyo's voice rose, cracking with raw fear. Do you have any idea what that does to me? Jungkook looked between them, a slow, nauseating realization forming. This wasn't casual. This wasn't new. This was history, shared, messy, unresolved. Minyu finally glanced at Jungkook, eyes narrowing. And you are? The question was polite in structure, hostile in tone. Jungkook opened his mouth, but Jimin spoke first. He's someone important. The hesitation cut deeper than any insult. Minyu's gaze sharpened. Important how? Silence spread, thick and suffocating. Jungkook felt heat crawl up his neck. He had faced screaming crowds, ruthless critics, sleepless tour, but nothing compared to standing in a dim lobby while the person he loved struggled to define him. I'm Jungkook, he said finally, voice steady despite the tremor in his chest. We go back a long way. Minyu's expression flickered with recognition and something darker. Oh, you're that Jungkook. That. Jungkook forced himself not to react. And you are? Someone who stayed, Minyu replied coolly. The words struck like a slap. Jimin's voice cut in sharp. Stop, both of you. Thunder rumbled outside, closer again, as if the storm had circled back just to witness the collision. Minyu turned to Jimin, softer, but no less intense. You promised me you wouldn't let him pull you back into whatever broke you before. Jungkook's pulse roared in his ears. I didn't break him. No, Minyu shot back. He stopped sleeping, stopped eating. He blamed himself for not being enough. I was the one who sat with him through panic attacks at 3 in the morning. Each word felt like a blade, precise and unforgiving. Jungkook looked at Jimin, searching for denial. Jimin said nothing. Guilt flashed across his face like lightning. You told him that? Jungkook asked quietly. Jimin's voice was barely audible. I told him everything. Everything. The years Jungkook had spent replaying a laugh, preserving a fragment of joy, reduced to a cautionary tale told to someone else. Minyu stepped closer, placing a protective hand on Jimin's shoulder. He rebuilt himself without you. Don't walk back in and expect to claim him because you're nostalgic. Jungkook's vision tunneled. I'm not claiming anyone. Good, Minyu said, because he's not yours. The lobby seemed to shrink, the air growing thin. Jimin shrugged Minyu's hand off his shoulder. I'm not anyone. The firmness in his voice startled them both. I asked you to trust me tonight, Jimin continued, looking at Minyu. You showed up like I was about to shatter without supervision. Minyu's composure cracked, because you almost did before. And you think controlling my movements will fix that? Jimin's voice sharpened. You think hovering will keep me from breaking? It's not control, it's care, Minyu insisted. It feels like a cage, Jimin said. The word hung in the air, heavy with implication. Jungkook watched the exchange, a strange, bitter understanding blooming in his chest. He had run from fear of hurting Jimin. Minyu had stayed and built walls so high Jimin could barely breathe. Two different kinds of damage, same result. Minyu's jaw tightened. You're saying I suffocate you. I'm saying you don't trust me to stand on my own, Jimin replied. And I let that happen because I was afraid of being alone. The confession was raw, unvarnished. Jungkook felt like an intruder witnessing something sacred and painful, yet he couldn't leave. Not now. Minyu looked at Jungkook, eyes blazing. This is what you do. You show up and everything destabilizes. Jungkook met his gaze. If everything falls apart because I walked into a room, it wasn't stable to begin with. The silence that followed was explosive. Jimin inhaled sharply. Minyu's fists clenched. For a moment, Jungkook thought he might swing. Instead, Minyu laughed, a brittle, humorless sound. "You think you're the hero of this story," Minyu said. "The one who returns with a confession and expects redemption." "I don't expect anything," Jungkook replied. "I came back because I never stopped caring, that's all." "Care isn't enough," Minyu snapped. "Care doesn't hold someone while they shake. Care doesn't remember their medication schedule. Care doesn't stay when things get ugly." Jungkook flinched. Jimin stepped between them. "Stop turning my life into a competition." Neither man spoke. Jimin's voice trembled but did not break. "Minyu, you helped me survive. I will always be grateful for that, but survival isn't the same as living." Minyu stared at him, devastation creeping into his expression. "And he makes you feel alive." Jimin hesitated. The pause was answer enough. Minyu staggered back a step, as if physically struck. Rainwater pooled around his shoes, forgotten. Jungkook wished, absurdly, that he could disappear, that he could spare them this collision of past and present. But the truth had already surfaced, and there was no pushing it back down. "I won't beg you to stay," Minyu said hoarsely. "I won't cage you. If you choose him, just don't come back when he leaves again." Jungkook opened his mouth, but Jimin spoke first. "He's not leaving," Jimin said, voice steady. Jungkook turned to him, startled. Jimin met his gaze, something fierce and terrified burning in his eyes. "Are you?" The question cut deeper than any accusation. Jungkook felt the weight of years pressing on his chest, the instinct to run, to protect by retreating, to avoid the risk of failing someone he loved. The storm outside roared again, wind rattling the glass doors like a challenge. He thought of the voice note, of laughter preserved because he had been too afraid to stay for the real thing. "No," Jungkook said. The word felt like stepping off a cliff and discovering, mid-fall, that he had wings. Minyu closed his eyes, pain etched into every line of his face. When he opened them, they were hollow with acceptance. "Then take care of him," Minyu said quietly, "better than you did before." He turned and walked back into the rain without another word, the doors slamming behind him. Jimin stared after him, shoulders trembling. "I never wanted to hurt him." "You didn't," Jungkook said softly. "You just stopped pretending." Jimin let out a broken laugh. "That's worse." The lobby felt too large now, too exposed. The storm's reflection rippled across the polished floor like fractured light. Jungkook hesitated before reaching out again. This time, when his fingers brushed Jimin's, Jimin didn't pull away. "I meant what I said," Jungkook murmured. "I'm not leaving." Jimin looked at him, eyes red, voice raw. "Then don't make me regret believing you." "I won't," Jungkook said. It wasn't a promise born of certainty. It was a vow forged in fear, hope, and the fragile courage to try again. Outside, the rain began to slow, each drop striking the pavement with a softer rhythm, like a world exhaling after holding its breath too long. Jimin squeezed his hand, not tightly, but enough to say he was still there. And for the first time, Jungkook understood that staying wasn't about never failing. It was about refusing to disappear when everything became too heavy to hold alone. The first punch landed before Jungkook even realized Minyu had come back. The glass doors burst open again with a violent crash, rain whipping inside like a living thing, and Minyu's fist collided with Jungkook's jaw with a sickening crack that echoed through the lobby. Jimin screamed his name. Jungkook staggered sideways, the metallic taste of blood flooding his mouth, vision flashing white. He barely caught himself on the edge of the reception desk before Minyu lunged again, grabbing his collar and slamming him back against the marble. "You think you get to rewrite everything?" Minyu snarled, his breath hot and shaking. "You think you get to walk back in and take him like nothing happened?" "Minyu, stop!" Jimin's hands clawed at Minyu's arm, but grief-fueled adrenaline made him immovable. "You're hurting him." "He hurt you first," Minyu roared. The words ricocheted off the walls, raw and feral. Jungkook forced his gaze to focus, ignoring the throbbing pain in his jaw. If you need to hit someone, he rasped, hit me, but don't pretend this is about protecting him. Minyu's grip tightened. You don't get to tell me what this is about. Jimin shoved himself between them, palms pressed against Minyu's chest. Look at yourself. This isn't love, this is fear. Minyu froze. The storm outside raged. Thunder rolling so loudly, it felt like the building itself might split apart. Rain lashed the glass, blurring the world beyond into streaks of grey and white. Jimin's voice dropped, shaking but resolute. You're not fighting for me, you're fighting your terror of being left. Minyu's expression fractured, fury giving way to something uglier, recognition. And you're not, he shot back, eyes flicking to Jungkook. You're choosing the one person who proved he could leave. Jimin flinched, as if struck. Jungkook felt the urge to step back, to vanish, to spare them both, but he stayed rooted to the spot, chest heaving. I left because I was afraid, Jungkook said hoarsely. You stayed because you were afraid. He suffered because we were both cowards in different ways. Silence detonated between them. Minyu released Jungkook's collar slowly, fingers trembling. You don't get to share blame to make yourself feel better. I'm not, Jungkook replied. I'm saying he deserved better than both of us. Jimin's breath hitched. The fluorescent lights overhead flickered, casting the lobby in uneven pulses of light and shadow, as if reality itself were unstable. Minyu dragged a hand through his soaked hair, chest rising and falling rapidly. Do you know what he was like after you left? He asked, voice breaking. He would sit on the kitchen floor at night, staring at his phone like it might ring if he stared hard enough. He stopped dancing, stopped laughing. I had to remind him to eat. Each word carved into Jungkook's ribs. Jimin whispered, Minyu don't. But Minyu continued, relentless. He said he must have been too much, too emotional, too needy. He thought if he'd been quieter, easier, you would have stayed. Jungkook's knees nearly buckled. I never thought that, Jungkook said, voice cracking. I left because I thought I was the one ruining him. Jimin looked between them, anguish etched into every line of his face. Do you hear yourselves? You both decided what was best for me without asking me what I wanted. The truth hit like a detonation. Neither man spoke. Jimin's voice rose, years of swallowed pain breaking free. You left to protect me. You stayed to protect me. Did either of you think I might want the chance to choose for myself, to fail, to be messy, to not be handled like glass? The storm seemed to pause, as if the world itself were listening. Jungkook whispered, You're right. Minyu's shoulders slumped. I just didn't want to watch you break again. I was already broken, Jimin said, because I was alone inside relationships that never let me be an equal. The words landed with devastating clarity. Jungkook pressed a hand to his bruised jaw, grounding himself in the pain. What do you want now? He asked softly. Jimin laughed, a hollow, exhausted sound. I don't know, that's the first honest answer I've had in years. Minyu closed his eyes, rainwater dripping from his lashes. If you choose him, I lose you. If I choose you, I lose myself, Jimin replied. The sentence hung in the air like a blade. Minyu staggered back another step, as if the floor had tilted beneath him. So that's it. No, Jimin said, that's the truth. Thunder cracked overhead, so loud it rattled the windows. Somewhere in the building, an alarm began to wail, a low, pulsing sound that vibrated through bone and steel. Jungkook glanced upward. That's the flood warning. The basement will start taking water. Minyu let out a disbelieving laugh. Of course it will. Why not drown the whole building while we're at it? Jimin wiped his face with the back of his hand, smearing rain and tears together. We need to get to higher floors. The alarm grew louder, more insistent. Red lights began to flash in the corners of the lobby, bathing everything in an urgent, apocalyptic glow. For a moment, none of them moved. Then Minyu spoke, voice hollow. I can't stay here and watch you choose him. Jimin's expression softened with grief. I'm not choosing anyone tonight. I'm choosing to stop lying to both of you and to myself. Jungkook felt something shift inside him. This wasn't a victory. It wasn't a reunion. It was an unraveling, painful, necessary, irreversible. Water began seeping under the glass doors, thin streams creeping across the marble floor like searching fingers. Minyu noticed first, we have to move, now. The urgency broke the stalemate. They rushed toward the stairwell, footsteps echoing in frantic rhythm as the alarm wailed and the storm pounded the building. Halfway up the first flight, Jimin stopped. Jungkook nearly collided with him. What's wrong? Jimin turned, eyes wild, not with fear of the flood, but of something deeper. If we walk out of this building, nothing will be the same. Jungkook swallowed. It already is. Minyu stood a few steps below, breathing hard, looking up at them like a man watching his past and future fracture in real time. Jimin's voice trembled. I'm terrified. So am I, Jungkook admitted. Minyu let out a ragged breath. Fear doesn't mean stop. It means you're about to lose something that mattered. Water surged louder below, the sound of it swallowing the lobby. Jimin closed his eyes for a brief moment, then opened them, clear, resolute, shattered, and brave all at once. Then let's stop losing each other in silence, he said. The three of them stood suspended between rising water and collapsing certainties, the storm howling outside, the alarm screaming inside, and the fragile, dangerous truth finally spoken aloud, no longer buried in voice notes, in late-night regrets, or in the spaces between words they were too afraid to say. The stairwell door above them burst open, and a rush of cold air spiraled down like a warning, carrying with it the distant sound of shouting. Up here, a voice yelled, the lower floors are flooding fast. Jimin flinched at the chaos, his fingers tightening around the railing. Jungkook noticed the tremor and instinctively moved closer, not touching, not crowding, just present. Minyu watched the subtle shift with a complicated expression, something between resentment and reluctant respect. They climbed. The emergency lights painted the concrete walls in pulses of red, turning every shadow into something alive. Water thundered below, a relentless surge swallowing the lobby they had just left behind. The building groaned, as if protesting the weight of the storm pressing against it. Halfway to the third floor, Jimin stopped again. Wait, he said, breathless. Minyu exhaled sharply. We can't keep stopping the water. I know, Jimin cut in, voice sharper than intended. He pressed his palm to his chest. I can't breathe. The confession hung in the narrow stairwell, raw and unguarded. Jungkook stepped forward, panic attack. Jimin nodded, eyes wide, unfocused. Minyu moved at the same time Jungkook did, both reaching for him, then freezing when their hands nearly collided. The moment stretched, tense and absurd. Back up, Minyu said quietly, not looking at Jungkook. I know how to help him. Jungkook's jaw tightened. So do I. Jimin's breath hitched, faster now, shallow and desperate. Stop, please. The plea shattered the standoff. Jungkook forced himself to step back, though every instinct screamed to stay. Minyu guided Jimin to sit on the step, crouching in front of him, voice softening. Look at me, Minyu murmured. Count with me, in for 4. Jimin tried, but his breath stuttered. Jungkook watched, fists clenched at his sides, feeling useless and intrusive all at once. Memories flashed, late nights when Jimin had hidden his anxiety behind jokes, the way he used to rub his thumb against his sleeve when overwhelmed. You're safe, Minyu continued. You're here, you're not alone. Jungkook swallowed hard. The words were true, but they weren't his to say. Jimin's gaze flicked to Jungkook, something pleading in his eyes, not for rescue, but for presence. So Jungkook did the only thing he could. He sat 2 steps below, close enough that Jimin could see him, far enough not to crowd. You used to hate counting, he said gently. You said numbers felt like cages. Minyu shot him a glare, not helping. But Jimin let out a shaky breath that almost resembled a laugh. I did say that, Jimin whispered. Then don't count, Jungkook said. Just listen. He tapped the railing lightly, steady, rhythmic, not a command, a heartbeat. Jimin's breathing began to sync with the soft, metallic pulse. Minyu watched, conflicted, as the tremors in Jimin's shoulders gradually eased. You're both idiots, Jimin murmured weakly, but thank you. The tension in the stairwell loosened by a fraction. Above them, footsteps pounded, voices echoing as residents evacuated upward. The building's alarm continued its relentless wail, a mechanical reminder that time was running out. Minyu stood slowly. We need to keep moving. Jimin nodded, pushing himself up. His legs wobbled, and without thinking, both Jungkook and Minyu reached out again. This time, Jimin grabbed both their wrists. The contact stunned them into stillness. I'm not glass, Jimin said, voice steadier now. If we're going to get through tonight, we do it without pretending one of you has to disappear. Minyu's throat bobbed. Jungkook felt the warmth of Jimin's hand like a brand. They climbed together. By the 5th floor, the sounds of the storm had dulled, replaced by the hum of generators and the murmur of frightened residents gathered in hallways. Emergency lanterns cast soft halos of light, illuminating faces tight with uncertainty. A woman approached them, clutching a small child. Is the lobby gone? She asked. Flooded, Minyu replied gently. You're safer up here. She nodded, eyes shining, and hurried past. Jimin watched her go, expression distant. Everyone looks like they're waiting for something to collapse. Storms do that, Jungkook said. They remind you how little control you have. Minyu glanced at him. Control is an illusion people cling to when they're afraid. Jimin huffed softly, says the man who tracks my location. Minyu flinched. Jungkook blinked. You what? Minyu's silence was answer enough. The air shifted, charged, dangerous. You promised you stopped, Jimin said, voice low. I did, Minyu insisted. After you found out tonight was different, you weren't answering the storm. You don't get to decide when my boundaries expire, Jimin snapped. Nearby conversations faltered as the tension spiked. Minyu's voice cracked. I thought you might be hurt. And instead you violated my trust, Jimin shot back. Again. Jungkook felt like he was witnessing a fracture widen in real time. Minyu looked at him suddenly. You think you're better, you recorded him without consent. The accusation hit like a thrown stone. Jungkook inhaled sharply. I was a teenager who didn't understand boundaries. I never shared it. I never used it to control him. Intent doesn't erase impact, Minyu said. Jimin closed his eyes. Stop, both of you. The hallway fell silent, except for the distant rumble of thunder. I am not evidence in your arguments, Jimin said, voice trembling with restrained fury. I am not a wound you compare. I am not a prize you win by suffering more. No one spoke. I loved you, Jimin said, looking at Minyu. And I loved you, he said, turning to Jungkook. But somewhere along the way, both of you started loving your fear more than you loved me. The truth detonated in the narrow space. Minyu staggered back against the wall, face ashen. Jungkook felt his chest cave inward, breath leaving him in a silent rush. Jimin's eyes glistened, but his voice remained steady. I don't know what we are after tonight. Maybe nothing, maybe something new. But if either of you tries to cage me again, out of love, out of fear, out of nostalgia, I will walk away. For real this time. The words were not a threat. They were a boundary carved in stone. Another resident rushed past, shouting that the water had reached the 2nd floor. The building shuddered, a low groan reverberating through the walls. Jungkook met Jimin's gaze. I don't want to cage you, he said quietly. I want to stand beside you, even if you decide I don't belong there. Minyu swallowed hard. I don't know how to love without trying to protect. Then learn, Jimin said. or you'll keep losing people you're trying to save. The generator lights flickered. For a moment, darkness swallowed the hallway, and in that instant of black, the sound of the storm surged back, feral, relentless, indifferent to human heartbreak. When the lights returned, something had shifted. Minyu looked at Jungkook, eyes red-rimmed but clear. If you hurt him again. I'll stay and face it, Jungkook said, not run. Minyu studied him, searching for weakness, for the old instinct to retreat. Finding none, he gave a single, reluctant nod. Jimin let out a breath that seemed to carry years of tension with it. Tonight isn't about choosing, he said. It's about surviving. The rest we'll face when the storm ends. Outside, the wind howled against the building, but inside the hallway, amid flickering lights and strangers bound by shared fear, the three of them stood in fragile, uneasy alignment, not reconciled, not resolved, but no longer hiding behind silence. And for the first time, the future felt less like a void, and more like a question they might finally be brave enough to answer. The sixth-floor corridor windows exploded inward with a deafening crash, sending shards of glass skittering across the tile like a spray of knives. People screamed. Wind tore through the hallway, violent and cold, ripping papers from bulletin boards and slamming doors against their hinges. Rain followed, slashing sideways into the building as if the storm had found a way inside. Jimin ducked instinctively, arms shielding his head. Jungkook grabbed his wrist and pulled him back from the spray of glass just as a jagged shard struck the wall where he had been standing. "Move," someone shouted. The hallway erupted into chaos, residents scrambling, a child wailing, emergency lanterns swinging wildly as the gale howled through the shattered windows. Minyu moved fast, shoving a heavy maintenance cart toward the broken frames. "Help me block it." Jungkook released Jimin and lunged forward, shoulder slamming into the cart beside Minyu. Their eyes met for a split second, hostility still there, but overridden by urgency. "Push," Minyu barked. They forced the cart against the window frame, metal screeching against tile. Wind still howled through the cracks, but the torrent of rain slowed. A man down the hall shouted, "The structure's not stable, we need to move higher." Jimin stumbled toward them, face pale. "The stairwell door on this floor is jammed. I tried it, it won't open." Minyu cursed under his breath. "Then we go up through the service ladder." Jungkook blinked, the maintenance shaft. "It leads to the roof," Minyu said. "Narrow, but it'll hold." Another window buckled ominously, glass spiderwebbing under the pressure. "Go," Jungkook urged. They ran. The maintenance corridor was dim, lit only by a flickering overhead bulb. The air smelled of rust, damp concrete, and something acrid, burnt wiring. The storm's roar was muffled here, replaced by the pounding of their footsteps and the distant groan of a building under siege. At the end of the corridor, a steel hatch hung half open, revealing a vertical ladder vanishing into darkness above. Jimin stared up. "That's high." "About 3 floors, Minyu said. "You go first." Jimin hesitated. Jungkook saw the tremor in his hands, the way his breathing threatened to spiral again. "I'll be right behind you," he said softly. "If you slip, I've got you." Minyu's jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. Jimin swallowed and began to climb. The ladder rattled under his weight, each metallic clang echoing through the shaft. Jungkook followed close enough to feel the warmth of his body through the cold air, one hand hovering near his ankle without touching. Halfway up, the building shuddered violently. Jimin froze. "I can't," he whispered, voice thin with panic. "It's moving." "It's the wind," Jungkook said. "The structure's holding, keep going, one rung at a time." Below them, Minyu's voice rose. "Don't look down, just climb." Jimin squeezed his eyes shut and moved. The shaft seemed to stretch endlessly, the dim light above no closer no matter how many rungs they climbed. Jungkook's arms burned, but he kept his focus on Jimin's shaking legs, ready to catch him if fear won. Finally, Jimin's hand hit the upper hatch. He shoved it open, cold rain spraying through as the roof access door swung wide. He hauled himself onto the roof and collapsed onto the gravel surface, gasping. Jungkook pulled himself up beside him, lungs on fire. Minyu emerged moments later, slamming the hatch closed against the wind. The rooftop was a war zone of rain and darkness. The storm raged unchecked, wind screaming across the open space, tearing at their clothes. The city below was a blur of flickering lights and flooded streets, sirens wailing in the distance. Jimin lay on his back, rain pelting his face, eyes wide with disbelief. "We're on the roof." "For now," Minyu said, scanning the perimeter. "Rescue teams will prioritize high ground." Lightning split the sky, illuminating them in stark white. For a heartbeat, Jungkook saw them clearly, three figures soaked and shaking, bound by history and fear and something none of them could name. Then the darkness returned. A loud metallic bang echoed from the far side of the roof. A loose antenna, wrenched free by the wind, slammed against its base repeatedly, sparks spitting into the rain. Jimin flinched. "That thing's going to snap." Minyu followed his gaze. "If it falls, it could take part of the structure with it." Jungkook wiped rain from his eyes. "We can't leave it." Minyu stared at him like he'd lost his mind. "In this wind." "It's anchored by 2 bolts, Jungkook insisted. "If we stabilize it." "You're not risking your life for a piece of metal," Minyu snapped. "I'm risking it so this roof doesn't collapse with people on it," Jungkook shot back. Jimin pushed himself up, fury sparking through his exhaustion. "Stop yelling and decide. People are counting on us whether we like it or not." The antenna shrieked again, metal twisting under the strain. Minyu cursed. "Fine, we do it fast." They ran. The wind fought every step, shoving them sideways, rain blinding and relentless. Jungkook reached the base first, grabbing the thrashing metal pole. The vibration rattled through his bones. "Bolts loose," he shouted. Minyu dropped to his knees, fumbling with the rusted fastener. "I need leverage." Jimin looked around wildly, then yanked a length of broken railing free from the gravel. "Use this." Lightning flashed again, thunder cracking almost instantly overhead. Minyu jammed the metal bar against the bolt and pushed. It groaned but didn't budge. "Hurry," Jungkook gritted out, muscles straining to hold the antenna steady. "I'm trying," Minyu snarled, shoving harder. Jimin braced himself against Minyu's back, adding his weight. Together. The bolt screeched, then turned. The antenna's violent shaking eased as Minyu tightened the anchor point. Jungkook held it steady until the last vibration died beneath his grip. For a moment, they stayed frozen in place, the storm raging around them. Then Minyu let out a breathless laugh. "We're idiots." Jimin laughed too, weak, incredulous, alive. The sound cut through the storm, fragile but unmistakable. Jungkook froze. It wasn't the same laughter as the voice note. It was rougher, threaded with exhaustion and defiance. But it was real, unrecorded, present. He didn't reach for his phone. He just listened. Jimin caught his gaze, something unspoken passing between them. Not nostalgia, not possession, recognition. Minyu noticed the exchange, pain flickering across his face, before he masked it with a tired smile. "You two always did thrive in disasters." "We didn't thrive," Jimin said quietly. "We survived." The words settled heavily. A helicopter thudded faintly in the distance, its searchlight sweeping across the storm-dark sky. Minyu straightened. "Rescue." Hope surged, sharp and terrifying. The searchlight passed over the building once, then again, slower this time. Jimin grabbed Jungkook's sleeve, fingers cold but steady. "If they take us down separately." "They won't," Jungkook said. "But if they do," Jimin insisted, voice urgent, "don't disappear again. Don't decide for me what's easier. Let me choose, even if I choose wrong." Jungkook cupped the back of his neck, rain-soaked hair slipping through his fingers. "I won't run." Minyu looked between them, something breaking quietly behind his eyes. And if he chooses neither of us? Jimin turned to him, rain streaming down his face like tears he refused to shed. Then you let me go without turning love into a debt I can never repay. Minyu's shoulders shook once, a silent acknowledgement of a truth he hated but understood. The helicopter's searchlight locked onto the roof, bathing them in blinding white. A voice boomed through a loudspeaker, distorted by wind. "Stay where you are, rescue team inbound." The three of them stood side by side, soaked and shaking, faces lifted into the storm and the light. For the first time that night, none of them spoke. There was nothing left to argue, nothing left to hide behind. Only the raw, terrifying possibility of what came after survival, the choices, the consequences, the fragile hope that love, stripped of fear and control, might still exist in whatever future waited beyond the storm. The rescue line missed the roof on the first throw. The rope, slick with rain, slapped against the gravel and skidded dangerously close to the edge before the wind yanked it sideways into the darkness. The helicopter roared overhead, blades slicing the storm into violent currents that nearly knocked Jimin off his feet. "Stay back from the edge," the loudspeaker boomed. Minyu grabbed Jimin's arm and hauled him away just as another gust slammed across the rooftop. Jungkook shielded his eyes, squinting through the blinding spray as the rescue crew prepared another line. "Second attempt," the voice crackled. The rope dropped again, this time landing within reach. Jungkook lunged forward, fingers closing around the soaked line, the coarse fibers biting into his palms. "Got it," he shouted. "Secure it to the anchor point," the rescuer yelled down. Minyu sprinted to the antenna base they had stabilized minutes earlier. "Here." Jungkook and Minyu worked in tense silence, knotting the rope with trembling fingers. Jimin hovered nearby, ready to help, his gaze flicking between the helicopter and the dark drop beyond the roof's edge. The building shuddered again, a deep, sickening vibration. Jimin froze. "Did you feel that?" A low crack echoed from somewhere below, concrete under pressure, metal under strain. "The lower structure's giving," Minyu said, voice tight. "We don't have much time." The loudspeaker blared, "One at a time, hook into the harness when we lower it." The harness descended, swinging wildly in the wind like a pendulum. Jungkook turned to Jimin. "You go first." Jimin's eyes widened. "No, you're bleeding." Jungkook touched his jaw absently, fingers coming away smeared with diluted blood. "I'll live." Minyu shook his head. "He's right, you first." Jimin looked between them, rain streaming down his face, indecision warring with urgency. "I'm not leaving either of you here." "You're not," Jungkook said. "You're making sure at least one of us is safe if the structure fails." The words hit too close to a fear none of them had voiced. Minyu clipped the harness to the rope and held it steady. "Jimin, now." Jimin's hands trembled as he grabbed the harness. The wind shoved him sideways, and Jungkook caught his shoulders, steadying him. Their faces were inches apart, rain dripping from lashes and chins. "You promised," Jimin whispered, "no disappearing." "I promised," Jungkook said. Jimin searched his face as if trying to memorize it. Then, with a shaky breath, he secured the harness around his chest. The helicopter winch engaged, the line going taut. Jimin's feet left the gravel, his body jerking upward into the storm. He gasped as the wind spun him slightly. "Jungkook." "I'm here," Jungkook shouted, though Jimin was already rising beyond his reach. Minyu watched, jaw clenched, as Jimin was lifted toward the helicopter door. For a moment, relief softened his features, then the building lurched again, more violently this time. A deafening crack split the night. The far corner of the roof sank several inches, gravel sliding toward the edge in a hissing cascade. "We're out of time," Minyu said. The loudspeaker crackled, "Next person, move." Jungkook grabbed the harness as it descended again, thrusting it toward Minyu. "Go." Minyu stared at him. "Don't be stupid, you're injured." I'm not dying on this roof, Jungkook shot back. But if you think I'm letting him wake up in that helicopter and find you missing too, you're wrong. Minyu hesitated, conflict raging across his face. He might not choose me. That's not the point, Jungkook said. You stayed. He deserves the chance to decide what that means. The admission hit Minyu like a physical blow. Another crack echoed, closer. Minyu swore and yanked the harness on. If you fall off this roof before they come back for you, I will haunt you. Jungkook barked a short laugh despite everything. Get in line. The winch pulled Minyu upward, his body vanishing into the storm. Jungkook stood alone on the fractured rooftop, wind clawing at his clothes, rain stinging his skin like needles. For the first time that night, silence fell inside him. No arguments, no accusations, just the raw, electric awareness that survival sometimes meant being the last one waiting. The building groaned beneath his feet. He moved toward the center of the roof, away from the sagging corner. The antenna they had secured shuddered but held, the rope anchor strained under the weight of the rescue line. The helicopter returned moments later, the harness dropping once more, swinging wildly in the gale. Last pickup, the loudspeaker blared, hurry. Jungkook grabbed the harness, and the roof shifted. The gravel beneath him slid, his foot plunging into a sudden fissure as the concrete cracked open with a thunderous roar. He slammed onto his knees. The harness slipping from his grasp as the ground tilted toward the collapsing edge. Hold on, the rescuer shouted. Jungkook clawed at the gravel, fingers scraping raw as the surface beneath him gave way inch by inch. The city lights spun below, a dizzying void of black water and distant sirens. Then a voice cut through the storm. Jungkook. He looked up. Jimin. Half his body leaned out of the helicopter, rescue crew gripping his harness as he fought against them, arm outstretched toward the roof. What are you doing? Jungkook shouted, horror slicing through him. Get back inside. I'm not leaving you, Jimin screamed, his voice raw, breaking against the wind. Minyu appeared behind him, wrapping an arm around his waist to keep him from falling. Jimin, you'll be pulled out. I don't care, Jimin choked. Not again. The words struck Jungkook harder than the collapsing roof beneath him. The fissure widened, concrete split with a gunshot crack. The harness slammed into Jungkook's shoulder, thrown by the rescuer with desperate precision. He grabbed it, hands slick with rain and blood, and fumbled the buckle. Hurry, Minyu shouted from the helicopter. Jungkook clipped in just as the section of roof beneath him gave way entirely. For one sickening instant, he was weightless. Then the winch jerked him upward as debris crashed into the darkness below. The force of the lift slammed him against the building's exterior. Pain exploded through his ribs, breath torn from his lungs as he spun in the air. Pull him in, Jimin cried. Hands grabbed Jungkook's arms, dragging him into the helicopter. He collapsed onto the metal floor, chest heaving, soaked and shaking. Jimin fell against him, clutching his jacket with both hands, as if confirming he was solid, alive, real. You idiot, Jimin sobbed. You absolute reckless idiot. Jungkook let out a weak laugh. You leaned out of a helicopter in a storm. Minyu sank onto the bench opposite them, face pale, eyes glistening with adrenaline and something dangerously close to tears. You both are impossible. The helicopter banked away from the collapsing building. Through the open door, they watched as a section of the roof caved in, swallowed by darkness and floodwater below. Jimin buried his face in Jungkook's shoulder, his body shaking, not from cold, but from the aftershock of terror. Jungkook hesitated, then wrapped his arms around him. Minyu watched the embrace, pain and acceptance warring in his expression. After a long moment, he looked away, staring out into the storm-lashed night. I thought I lost you, Jimin whispered into Jungkook's jacket. I'm still here, Jungkook said. For how long? Jimin asked, voice fragile. Jungkook closed his eyes. As long as you let me stay. Minyu's jaw tightened, and if staying means watching him choose someone else. Jungkook met his gaze across the narrow cabin. Then I stay anyway, because loving him was never supposed to be about winning. The helicopter's engine roared, carrying them over a drowned city glittering with emergency lights. Jimin pulled back, looking between them, eyes red but clear. I'm not choosing tonight. No one's asking you to, Minyu said quietly. But I will choose eventually, Jimin continued. And it won't be out of fear, not of being alone, not of hurting someone. I'll choose what lets me breathe. The words settled over them, heavier than the storm clouds below. Jungkook nodded. That's all I want. Minyu exhaled slowly. Me too. For the first time, the admission didn't sound like surrender. It sounded like truth. The helicopter door slid shut, muting the storm to a distant roar. Inside the cabin, the three of them sat in exhausted silence, bruised and soaked and irrevocably changed. No one knew what waited when they landed. But for the first time, the future was no longer a replay of old mistakes. It was an unwritten space, terrifying and fragile, where love might exist without cages, without disappearances, without the need to preserve laughter in a file just to remember what it sounded like when they were brave enough to stay. The rain had not stopped since dawn, turning the city into a blur of grey reflections and restless shadows. Inside the dimly lit penthouse, the silence between them felt heavier than the storm outside. Adrian stood by the window, jaw tight, while Maya paced the marble floor like a caged animal, her heels striking sharp, impatient echoes. You lied to me, she said, her voice trembling not with weakness but with rage barely contained. For months, Adrian, you stood next to me, looked me in the eye and lied. Adrian did not turn around. I did what I had to do to protect you. Protect me, Maya let out a bitter laugh, by making me the scapegoat, by letting the entire board believe I was the one who leaked the documents. He spun around then, eyes blazing. You think this is a game? Those documents would have destroyed everything, your father's legacy, the company, all of it. My father is dead, she shot back, and you're using his name like a shield for your own ambition. The words hung in the air like a slap. Adrian's expression shifted, anger cracking to reveal something raw underneath. You don't know what you're talking about. Then tell me, Maya demanded, stepping closer. Tell me why the offshore accounts lead back to your signature. Tell me why the whistleblower used your private server. Tell me why the man I trusted more than anyone is at the center of this entire scandal. Thunder rolled across the skyline, shaking the glass walls. Adrian's silence was answer enough. Maya's voice dropped to a whisper. Was any of it real, us? He closed his eyes, as if the question hurt more than any accusation. You were the only real thing in my life. Were, she echoed, her eyes glistening. Past tense, how convenient. Before he could respond, the elevator doors chimed. Both of them froze. A slow, deliberate clap echoed from the entrance. Bravo, came a smooth voice. I must say, the drama is even better in person. They turned to see Victor Hale stepping into the room, raincoat draped over his shoulders like a conqueror's cape. His smile was thin, predatory. Victor, Adrian growled, you weren't invited. And yet here I am, Victor replied lightly. It seems secrets have a way of inviting themselves to the surface. Maya's breath caught. You're the one who exposed the lake. Victor tilted his head. Exposed? No, I merely redirected attention. Your dear Adrian did the rest. Adrian lunged forward, but Maya raised a hand, stopping him. Her gaze never left Victor. Why? Because, Victor said, stepping closer, power abhors a vacuum. Your father's death left a throne unclaimed. Adrian wanted it. I simply made sure the world saw what he was willing to sacrifice to get it. That's a lie, Adrian snapped. You forged those trails, you manipulated the board. Victor's smile widened. And you covered it up. You signed the authorizations, you moved the funds, you buried the evidence. Tell me, Adrian, at what point does manipulation become complicity? Maya staggered back as if struck. Adrian, tell me he's lying. Adrian's silence shattered her. Tears welled in her eyes, but her voice hardened. I stood by you, I defended you, I destroyed my own reputation to protect you. I never asked you to, he said hoarsely. No, she whispered, you just let me. Victor watched them with detached amusement. This is touching, truly, but we are running out of time. The board meets in an hour. By then, the arrest warrant will be public. Maya's head snapped up. Arrest warrant. For Adrian, Victor said. Fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy, the usual trifecta. Adrian let out a low, humorless laugh. You think this ends with me in handcuffs? You're forgetting something, Victor. And what's that? Adrian reached into his jacket and placed a small flash drive on the table. Mutual destruction. Victor's smile faltered for the first time. What is this? Every transaction, every bribe, every politician you own, I made copies long before you decided to play kingmaker. Maya stared at the flash drive, realization dawning. You were preparing for this. I was preparing for him, Adrian said, never taking his eyes off Victor. I knew he'd come for us. Victor's composure cracked just for a second. You're bluffing. Try me, Adrian replied. The storm outside intensified, lightning illuminating the room in stark white flashes. Maya looked between the two men, her world collapsing into a battlefield of ambition and betrayal. Stop, she said, her voice breaking yet commanding. Both of you, this ends now. Neither man moved. Maya stepped forward, grabbing the flash drive. You want power, you want revenge, fine, but you don't get to burn everything to the ground and call it victory. Victor's eyes narrowed, careful. Maya, that drive is the only leverage keeping him alive. And it's the only thing keeping you free, she shot back, which means I'm the one holding the balance. Adrian stared at her, fear and admiration colliding in his expression. Maya, don't. She turned to him, tears streaming freely now. You should have trusted me. Then she faced Victor. The board meeting will proceed, the truth will come out, all of it. No more shadows, no more games. Victor's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. You think the truth will save you, the truth destroys. Then let it, she said, at least it will be honest. For a moment, the only sound was the relentless rain. Victor exhaled slowly, studying her as though seeing her for the first time. You are your father's daughter, he said quietly. He would have been inconvenient. Maya's grip tightened on the flash drive, and you are exactly what he warned me about. Sirens wailed faintly in the distance, growing louder. Adrian's voice softened. Maya, whatever happens next. She didn't let him finish. Whatever happens next, she said, we face it without lies. The elevator chimed again. Heavy footsteps approached. Victor straightened his coat, mask of composure sliding back into place. Adrian stood motionless, as if surrender and defiance had merged into the same quiet resolve. Maya remained between them, trembling but unyielding, holding the fragile weight of truth in her hand as the doors opened and the future came crashing in. The elevator doors slid open with a metallic hush, revealing two uniformed officers and a woman in a dark suit, whose expression carried the cold authority of someone accustomed to ending empires with a single sentence. The rain roared against the glass walls, as if the storm itself had climbed the tower to witness the reckoning. Maya Raman, the woman said, her voice calm but unyielding. I'm Prosecutor Lestari. We have warrants for the arrest of Adrian Cole and Victor Hale. The names seemed to echo through the penthouse like a final verdict. Victor recovered first, smoothing his sleeves with deliberate elegance. Prosecutor, he said, offering a thin smile, I believe there has been a misunderstanding. There has, Lestari replied, but not on our side. Adrian did not move. His gaze remained fixed on Maya, as if memorizing her face in the last fragile seconds before everything shattered. You don't have to do this, he said quietly. Maya's hand tightened around the flash drive. Her knuckles had turned white, but her voice was steady. Yes, I do. Victor's eyes flicked to the drive, calculation racing behind them. Think carefully, he murmured. Once you hand that over, there is no undoing what comes next. Your father's name will be dragged through every headline. The company will collapse. You will lose everything. A tear slid down Maya's cheek, but she did not look away. I already lost everything the moment the truth became a weapon. The officers stepped forward. Adrian raised his hands slowly, not in defeat but in acceptance. Before this ends, he said, his voice rough, you deserve to know one thing. I never wanted the throne. I wanted to protect what he built, and I wanted a life with you. But somewhere along the way, I started believing the lie that I had to become a monster to guard something pure. Maya's breath hitched. You had a choice. I know, he whispered, and I chose wrong. Victor let out a quiet, incredulous laugh. How touching, a confession wrapped in romance. Do you think history will remember your intentions? It will remember the numbers, the damage, the bodies buried under your balance sheets. History will remember the truth, Maya said, her voice gaining strength, because I'm going to make sure it's told. She stepped forward and placed the flash drive in Prosecutor Lestari's hand. The moment it left her fingers, the room seemed to exhale. The balance of power shifted, invisible but absolute. Victor's composure finally fractured. You foolish girl, he hissed. You've just destroyed yourself. Maybe, Maya said, but I didn't destroy my integrity. The officers moved in. One cuffed Adrian, the metal clicking shut with a sound that made Maya flinch. He did not resist. His eyes never left hers. I'm sorry, he said. She swallowed the sob rising in her throat. So am I. Across the room, Victor struggled as the second officer took his arm. You think this ends me? He spat. Men like me don't end, we evolve. Prosecutor Lestari met his glare, not in a cell. As they led him toward the elevator, Victor twisted back to look at Maya one last time. Power will come for you, he warned, and next time you'll understand why we lied. The doors closed on his voice. Silence fell, broken only by the relentless drumming of rain. Adrian paused at the threshold, the officer's hand on his shoulder. Whatever happens to me, he said softly, don't let them turn you into what we became. Maya nodded, unable to speak. Then he was gone. The penthouse, once a monument to ambition, now felt like a hollow shell. The city lights flickered through sheets of rain, indifferent to the collapse of the lives that had towered above it only hours before. Prosecutor Lestari lingered. You did the right thing, she said. Maya let out a fragile laugh. Why does it feel like the wrong thing? Because truth is rarely kind, Lestari replied, but it is necessary. When she left, Maya was alone. She walked to the window where Adrian had stood, staring at the storm swallowing the skyline. Her reflection looked unfamiliar, stronger perhaps, but carved by loss. The future stretched before her, uncertain and unforgiving. Her father's empire would fall, the headlines would be merciless, friends would vanish, enemies would multiply, and Adrian would become a name spoken in cautionary tones. Yet beneath the grief, beneath the ruin, there was something unbroken. Joyce. She pressed her palm to the cold glass as thunder rolled across the city. No more lies, she whispered to the storm, to the ghosts of what had been, to the fragile promise of what might still be rebuilt. Outside, the rain began to ease, the first hesitant lights of dawn pushing through the clouds. The war for power had ended. The fight for truth had just begun. And Maya, standing alone in the quiet aftermath, finally understood that losing everything had given her the one thing no one could ever take again, herself.